Usually when we talk about history, there's this built-in expectation of precision.
Oh, absolutely. Like it's an engineering schematic or something.
Right. A war starts,
Yeah.
and the history book just shows you that jagged, solid white line of a border drawn on a map.
Yeah, and the teacher just taps the chalkboard and says, well, there it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is what happened, and that is why. It's clean. It's totally categorized.
And it is incredibly comforting to view the past that way. I mean, we desperately want reality to be a neat sequence of causes and effects that we can just package up into a syllabus.
Right. Like if A happened, then B just had to happen.
Exactly.
And then you step into the world of temporal mechanics and quantum probability and just this sheer unpredictable weight of human nature. And suddenly that historical X-ray machine is completely shattered.
It really is.
We're looking at a chronological landscape that is, well, murky.
Yeah.
Muddy even. So welcome to the deep dive.
I am so excited for this one.
Today, we are immersing ourselves in Gabriel Stroop's fascinating 2025 thought experiment, Theodore Langley. Gears of thought and steam.
Such a brilliant book.
It really is. So imagine inheriting a piece of impossible technology, a steam-powered time machine, but your only motivation for using it is raw, blinding grief.
Yeah, that is the core of it. What happens when a person tries to wrestle history into submission just to save someone they love?
Well, history wrestles back. That's what happened. We're going to trace the entire evolution of human thought today, from ancient philosophers to modern quantum physicists, to figure out why the universe resists our control.
And what happens when a person finally learns to just, understand time instead of constantly fighting it?
Yeah. And what makes Stroop's novel so compelling isn't just the sci-fi mechanics, it's how he grounds these massive abstract concepts in a deeply personal, emotional core.
Right. Our protagonist, Theodore Langley, inherits this brass, steam-powered timepiece from his father.
But his father wasn't just like a quirky watchmaker.
No, he was a casualty of the meat grinder of the Great War. He died in the mud of Europe.
Okay, let's unpack this right out of the gate, because Theodore's motivation basically dictates everything that follows.
It does.
His father's last written words to him were, "History needs stewards, son."
And Theodore, in his grief, just completely misinterprets that.
Totally. He takes steward to mean architect.
He thinks he needs to shape history, to fix it.
Yeah, he wants to go back to 1914, stop the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and completely unmake the war that took his father.
And that misinterpretation is the engine of the first third of the book. I mean, Theodore looks at history as a fragile mechanical construct.
Like a clock.
Exactly like a clock. He operates under the assumption that if he just applies physical force at the exact right pressure point, the entire global system changes.
It's the ultimate hubris of action.
It really is. He honestly believes a single man can be the supreme architect of reality.
Which takes us to his very first attempt, Sarajevo, 1914.
Oh, this scene.
I know, right? Theodore has studied this day obsessively. He knows the motorcade route, the timing of the cars, the exact position of Gavrilo Princip standing outside Moritz Schiller's delicatessen.
And Stroop writes this scene with such visceral, sensory intensity.
Yeah, Theodore steps into the street, he smells the horse dung, he hears the clatter of the market stalls, he sees Princip reaching into his coat.
And Theodore just lunges.
He literally grabs Princip's wrist. He has his hand on the gun. He thinks, I've done it. I've saved millions of lives.
But the reality of the physical world pushes back in a really brutal way.
So brutal.
I mean, Theodore is a scholar from the future. Princip is a young man fueled by desperate, radicalized conviction.
Princip just punches Theodore in the stomach, knocking the wind out of him.
They wrestle right there in the dirt. Theodore feels the cold steel of the gun against his own chest.
And the tragic irony is that the Archduke's car engine stalls right in front of them, exactly as it did in the real timeline.
It's maddening. Princip rips his arm free and fires.
But the first bullet doesn't hit the Archduke or his wife.
No, it hits Theodore in the side.
A literal and metaphorical blow from history itself.
Yeah, the universe isn't just ignoring his intervention. It is actively penalizing him for it.
He falls to the ground in agony, and Princip just steps over him and fires the second shot anyway.
The Archduke dies.
And Theodore is bleeding out on the cobblestones, realizing that despite his flawless planning, his foreknowledge, his physical intervention history proceeded exactly as it always has.
He barely spins the gears on his timepiece and escapes back to his own time.
But he is fundamentally broken by this failure.
He's broken, yeah, but he hasn't learned the lesson yet.
Not at all.
Theodore assumes his failure was tactical, not philosophical. He thinks, okay, physical brute force against an armed fanatic isn't enough to stop a geopolitical tidal wave.
So he recalibrates.
Right. If he can't outmuscle history, he decides he will outtalk it. He tries to become a negotiator of fate.
And where better to negotiate than Rome, 44 BCE, the Ides of March. Theodore wants to stop the assassination of Julius Caesar to prevent the fall of the Republic and, the decades of civil war that followed.
So he approaches Marcus Iunius Brutus before the Senate convenes.
And Theodore doesn't just beg. He speaks flawless classical Latin.
Which is such a great detail.
It is. He appeals directly to Brutus, warning him that striking down one man won't save the Republic. It will actually be the catalyst that destroys it forever.
He's using logic. He is speaking the language of history's elite makers. And for a fleeting second in the text, it seems to work.
Brutus actually wavers.
He does. He looks into Theodore's eyes and sees the terrifying certainty of the future. But then Caesar arrives.
And the sheer momentum of the conspiracy, the peer pressure of dozens of senators who have already committed to blood, it's just too great. The senators swarm.
And Theodore's facade shatters. He actually screams out in English, "Beware."
He loses his composure entirely. He tries to physically throw himself between Caesar and a blade, but in the chaotic frenzy, he gets stabbed in the ribs by a random fleeing senator.
He falls next to Caesar, just listening to the dictator gasp his final breaths, bleeding out on the marble.
So now we have 2 attempts, 2 severe wounds, a gunshot and a stab wound, and 0 historical changes.
It's a fascinating escalation. Theodore assumes his failure in Rome was due to the public, chaotic nature of the event.
Because a crowd has a mind of its own.
Exactly. So he pivots a third time. If brute force fails and open diplomacy fails, he is going to use stealth. He decides to erase the ink before the pen even touches the page.
Dallas, Texas, November 1963. The Texas School Book Depository.
Yeah.
Theodore sneaks up to the 6th floor. He's not trying to reason with Lee Harvey Oswald, and he's not trying to make a public scene.
He just wants to quietly, cleanly disarm him from behind.
He creeps up, grabs the rifle barrel, but Oswald instantly fights back.
They slam against the stacks of book cartons. The gun jerks wildly, but it still fires. 2 shots ring out in the struggle.
And down in Dealey Plaza, history happens anyway. JFK is assassinated.
Theodore is left standing there, choking on the smell of gunpowder, completely helpless.
He's tried force, persuasion, and stealth to save a life. And the timeline absolutely refuses to buckle.
So, driven by his mounting rage and unhealed grief, Theodore just abandons his moral high ground.
He decides that if history won't let him save the innocent, maybe it will let him execute the guilty.
He decides to eliminate the tyrants before they can cause the suffering.
Which takes him to Munich, 1939. He tries to keep Adolf Hitler in the Burgerbräukeller just a few minutes longer so that Georg Elser's historically failed time bomb will actually kill him.
Theodore discreetly shoves a massive stack of beer mugs to the floor, creating a huge commotion to interrupt the speech.
But Hitler doesn't stop. He just speaks faster.
His tempo accelerates, he finishes his speech early, and marches out of the hall.
The bomb goes off minutes later, bringing down the ceiling, but missing Hitler entirely.
Then he goes to Cuba, 1961, the Bay of Pigs invasion.
Theodore is lying in the jungle grass with a high-powered sniper rifle, aiming right at Fidel Castro's chest from a massive distance.
He doesn't even have to interact with anyone.
But before his finger can even pull the trigger, a Cuban soldier on a random patrol stumbles into him and tackles him from behind.
He is dragged into a dark interrogation room.
Okay, I have to jump in here with an analogy because reading this sequence back-to-back is maddening.
It really is.
It feels like time has an immune system. Like Theodore is a virus, an invading pathogen, and history just deploys these situational white blood cells to neutralize him so the timeline stays healthy.
That's a great way to look at it.
Whether it's a random Roman senator with a dagger, Oswald's adrenaline-fueled grip strength, or a Cuban soldier stumbling through the Brusher Ocean, the universe just deploys whatever is nearby to make sure he loses.
I like the immune system analogy, but I think Stroop is actually arguing something slightly different.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, history isn't a sentient biological entity fighting back with white blood cells. It possesses a massive, unrelenting inertia.
Inertia.
It's the combined momentum of billions of intersecting human lives and decisions. But what happens in that Cuban interrogation room is what really cracks Theodore's understanding of reality.
Right. The Cuban officer goes through Theodore's bag, finds the brass steam timepiece, and then looks up at Theodore and speaks to him in perfect English.
He says, "You're out of place, Mr. Langley."
I mean, that gave me actual chills.
It is a terrifying moment of clarity. How does a Cuban officer in 1961 know the name of a time traveler from the future?
The officer asks, "What time are you really from?" And then he drops the hammer.
He tells Theodore, "You're not the first and you won't be the last."
That is just mind-blowing. It proves that Theodore isn't invisible. He is creating ripples.
People are perceiving him. The universe knows he's there.
But he is fundamentally failing to change the ocean's current.
Think about you, the listener, right now. Have you ever tried to force a situation at work or maybe in a toxic relationship where you just keep pushing and pushing, trying to manipulate the outcome to be what you want?
And the universe just stubbornly pushes back every single time.
Exactly. You exhaust yourself, you damage yourself, fighting the reality of the situation. That is Theodore's baseline state in that Cuban prison.
He realizes that forcing history is an illusion that just slips through his fingers like sand.
Bruised, bleeding, sitting in the dark, Theodore finally has his first real epiphany.
He realizes his father didn't teach him to fight history. He taught him to understand it.
If brute force, diplomacy, stealth, and murder all fail against the inertia of time, Theodore realizes he has to stop punching the river.
He has to start mapping it.
He manages to escape the prison, grabs his timepiece, and makes a fundamental shift in his mission.
He stops visiting the loud, violent moments of historical trauma and instead starts visiting the quiet, foundational thinkers of human history.
He goes seeking solace. He turns to the ancient philosophers.
Which kicks off section 2,
Yeah.
Seeking Solace. And this philosophical shift is so necessary because Theodore needs a why.
He starts in Halicarnassus, 425 BCE, visiting Herodotus, widely considered the father of history.
Theodore essentially asks him, if you could see the future and you knew horrific suffering was coming, why wouldn't you stop it?
Herodotus responds with a profoundly humbling metaphor. He tells Theodore that history is a river. If you build a dam to divert the river to save one village from a flood, you end up starving another village downstream of its drinking water.
Herodotus looks at this arrogant time traveler and asks, who are you to judge whose suffering is necessary and whose is unjust?
It strips Theodore of his moral superiority.
Completely. He really thought he possessed the ultimate objective clarity to choose who lives and dies in the 20th century.
Herodotus challenges the very arrogance of assuming any human has that right.
So next, Theodore travels to Athens in 399 BCE, arriving on the very day of the trial and execution of Socrates.
Socrates is literally preparing to drink the hemlock. He's been condemned by his own city for corrupting the youth and impiety.
He is the victim of a massive historical injustice.
And Theodore asks him the same desperate question, why does history resist being changed? Why can't I stop this?
I was honestly fascinated by this interaction because Stroop has Socrates give this incredibly serene answer.
Socrates says history is merely a mirror reflecting the nature of men.
You can't change history without changing the men who make it.
Attempting to change history alone is like trying to change your reflection by punching the glass. You'll just end up with bloody knuckles and a broken mirror.
It's a brilliant psychological argument.
Socrates is telling him that historical events, assassinations, wars, coups are just symptoms. Human nature is the underlying disease.
If you stop Gavrilo Princip, human anger and nationalism will just find another trigger. The disease will manifest somewhere else.
So Theodore travels to Luthanshalu, China, in 500 BCE to ask Confucius how to cure the disease. How do you change human nature?
Confucius is teaching his disciples, and he tells Theodore that any fool can stand outside and shout at a storm.
A wise man teaches people to build strong roofs.
History is written by men, and a true leader must guide them not by forcing their hands or wrestling their guns away, but by shaping their morals through teaching.
Confucius focuses entirely on preparation over prevention.
Theodore argues, but what if the flood is coming anyway? What if the war is inevitable?
And Confucius calmly replies, a great flood will carve its path. A wise man does not fight the river. He teaches the people to swim and to build boats.
Then Theodore goes to Hanggu Pass to meet Lao Tzu, the legendary founder of Taoism.
Lao Tzu is just sitting quietly, watching a stream trickle over some rocks.
He tells Theodore that throwing stones into a rapid river only exhausts the man throwing them. He advises moving with the stream.
Lao Tzu is introducing the concept of wu wei, or non-action. He says to do nothing is still to act.
It's about finding effortless action in harmony with the natural order.
Exactly.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, and I have to push back on this, because reading it, I felt Theodore's frustration.
Sure.
Lao Tzu tells him to surrender to the flow, but honestly, doesn't that just sound like a philosophical excuse for cowardice?
I could see why you'd say that.
I mean, if you know a literal world war is coming, how does sitting by a stream and flowing with it help anyone? It feels like complacency disguised as deep wisdom.
I see exactly why you'd read it that way, and it's a very natural, modern, Western reaction.
Right.
We are deeply conditioned to equate aggressive action with virtue. If there's a problem, you attack it.
Exactly.
But Lao Tzu isn't advocating for defeatism. Wu Wei is not surrender as giving up. It is active harmony.
Active harmony.
It's about recognizing the absolute limits of your own individual agency. If you expend all your energy fighting a rip current you cannot beat, you drown.
Oh, okay.
If you learn how the current moves, you can swim parallel to the shore, navigate it, and actually survive to help others.
That makes sense logically, but it still feels emotionally passive to Theodore. He's carrying the grief of his dead father.
He needs something more active.
Which brings him to India, around 400 BCE, where he sits beneath the Bodhi tree with the Buddha.
This is the culmination of his philosophical journey. Theodore lays it all out. He admits to the Buddha that he has seen history unfold, he has tried to force it to change, he has failed, and he is exhausted.
He asks the ultimate question: how do I end the suffering?
And the Buddha completely reframes the concept of history for him. The Buddha says suffering is a fire. You don't put out a fire by fighting the flames, you remove the fuel that feeds them.
And Theodore asks, what is the fuel?
And the Buddha says, ignorance?
That's the fuel. Prejudice, the illusion of separation, the desperate desire for control.
That is Theodore's massive, earth-shattering aha moment.
It changes everything. Theodore realizes that history doesn't stumble into tragedy because of some cruel, inevitable, magical fate. It stumbles into tragedy because of missing knowledge.
People make horrific, violent choices because they are blinded by fear, deception, or a total lack of understanding of their interconnectedness.
Theodore realizes his fundamental mistake. He isn't supposed to steer the river of history. He's supposed to clear the muddy water so people can actually see where they are swimming.
It completely redefines his father's dying words. History needs stewards.
A steward doesn't take a pen and rewrite the book. They preserve the book, they protect the pages, and they teach others how to read it.
Philosophy gives Theodore his why. It begins to heal his grief and gives him a non-violent purpose.
But, well, let's be real. Theodore is still a guy with a hissing, steam-powered time machine in his pocket.
He's fundamentally a man of science.
Philosophy is great for healing his soul, but his brain is still screaming for the how. He needs to understand the actual physical mechanics of why the universe functions this way.
Which is the perfect transition into Section 3, Seeking Insight, the Physics of Fate.
Theodore wants to understand the literal mathematical laws of reality that govern his timepiece and his failures.
He pivots from philosophers to physicists. He begins this new phase in Cambridge, England, 1680, stepping into the candlelit study of Sir Isaac Newton.
And Stroop writes Newton as brilliantly, infuriatingly arrogant.
Theodore walks in, and Newton barely looks up from his parchment. Theodore asks him why history resists change.
Newton scoffs and basically says, you assume it was ever possible to change it.
Newton views the entire universe as a rigid mechanical clockwork system governed by absolute unbreakable laws of motion.
Newton represents the classical, deterministic view of physics.
He believes that if you could know the exact position and momentum of every single particle in the universe at one moment, you could predict the entire future perfectly.
It's all just balls on a cosmic billiard table.
To Newton, Theodore's belief that he can just pop into the timeline, move a billiard ball, and not instantly shatter the entire mechanical clock of the universe is childish absurdity.
But Stroop includes this incredible, subtle character detail. While Newton is confidently lecturing Theodore about absolute certainty, Theodore notices that Newton is secretly, neurotically tapping his fingers against his desk.
Yes, the tapping. Theodore asks him directly, have you ever found peace in your calculations?
And Newton's arrogance drops for just a second.
He admits quietly that there are irregularities in the planetary orbits that he cannot explain. There are things even he cannot calculate.
He's spent his entire life chasing absolute divine certainty, trying to force the universe into perfect mathematical boxes, but deep down, he knows he couldn't capture it all.
The clockwork has a wobble.
Because the universe is not just a rigid, perfect clock. So, needing a broader view, Theodore jumps forward to Berlin, 1915, to speak with Albert Einstein.
And I loved this scene. Einstein is just sitting there in his messy office, smoking his pipe, totally unfazed by the sudden appearance of a time traveler.
Einstein's perspective shatters Newton's rigid billiard table. Einstein explains that space-time is not a fixed, empty background where events just happen. It's a flexible fabric.
Now, usually deep dives explain relativity using that tired analogy of a bowling ball on a trampoline.
But let's do something better. Imagine space-time as the ocean, and history is the massive, heavy displacement of water.
Einstein tells Theodore that history isn't changed by single, isolated events, like moving a coffee cup or even stopping one bullet in Dallas.
Right. History is shaped by the massive gravity of entire civilizations.
Imagine human civilization is an enormous, heavily armored cruise ship moving through the ocean at top speed.
And Theodore showing up in Rome, or Dallas, is like a guy in a tiny rowboat trying to push the side of the cruise ship to change its course with his butt hands.
The ship has too much mass, too much momentum. It's going to plow right past him, maybe swamp his rowboat in the process, which is exactly what happened when he got shot and stabbed.
Einstein also introduces the actual mechanics of Theodore's travel. He hints at Einstein-Rosen-Bridge's wormholes.
He suggests Theodore isn't really moving linearly backward along the side of the cruise ship. He's folding the ocean and stepping across the crests of the waves.
He mentions gravitational waves, the massive ripples in space-time caused by huge events.
But Einstein, much like Newton, still fundamentally believes in an underlying elegant order. He famously hated the idea that the universe was random.
He said God does not play dice.
So Theodore, looking for an explanation for the randomness he experienced, leaves Berlin and heads to California in 1965 to meet the king of quantum randomness, Richard Feynman.
Feynman is the perfect chaotic counterpoint to Einstein's need for elegant order.
Theodore finds him sitting in a diner, tossing a coin, rolling it over his knuckles.
Feynman explains history not as a rigid clock and not as a heavy cruise ship, but as a quantum probability field.
A casino.
Feynman says, every moment isn't a single locked event. It's a spread of possible outcomes.
He brings up quantum superposition, the idea that a particle, or in this case, a historical moment, exists in all possible states simultaneously until it is observed or forced to collapse into reality.
Feynman tells Theodore that trying to stop a massive historical event at the exact moment it happens is like walking up to a roulette table and betting your life on a single number when the wheel is already rigged.
The odds were always stacked against him.
But Feynman gives him the operational key.
He says you don't force one big change at the climax. You stack the deck over decades.
You introduce thousands of tiny, seemingly insignificant variables.
You talk to a student here, you plant a seed of an idea there, you delay a train by 5 minutes. With enough small shifts, the underlying probability field changes.
Feynman introduces the many-worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics.
He suggests Theodore isn't just traveling up and down one single timeline. His actions, his tiny choices, are constantly multiplying realities, branching off into infinite new universes.
So let's trace this incredible progression of thought. Newton sees the universe as a ticking clock.
Einstein sees it as a massive, unstoppable cruise ship.
Feynman sees it as a branching casino.
And then Theodore goes to Paris in the 1890s to meet the mathematician Henri Poincaré, who essentially sees a butterfly flapping its wings.
Poincaré is the father of chaos theory. He shows Theodore complex mathematical calculations of planetary orbits, where a tiny, immeasurably small variation in a starting condition, a literal fraction of a decimal point, leads to vastly unpredictable trajectories over grand scales of time.
Poincaré synthesizes the rigid rules of Newton with the crazy uncertainty of Feynman.
A system can have rules, but still be entirely unpredictable over long periods because of tiny variations.
Right.
But wait, I have to interject here and play devil's advocate.
Go for it.
If Feynman is right, that small changes stack up in branch timelines, and Poincaré is right, that tiny variations cause massive chaotic shifts, why did Theodore's massive violent physical interventions, like trying to save JFK or wrestling a gun away from Princip, fail 100% of the time?
It's a fair question.
Shouldn't throwing himself onto Julius Caesar have violently split the timeline right then and there?
That is the million-dollar question, and Stroop handles it beautifully. The text suggests that Theodore was trying to force a low-probability event without stacking the deck first.
Okay, unpack that.
Think about Poincaré's butterfly effect. The butterfly flapping its wings causes a hurricane weeks later, thousands of miles away.
Right.
But if you walk out into a hurricane that is already hitting your house, flapping your arms isn't going to stop the wind.
Oh, wow. That's it exactly.
Theodore showing up in Dallas and grabbing Oswald's gun is trying to flap his arms in a hurricane. It's too late. The starting conditions were set decades prior.
To change the river's course, you don't throw one boulder in at the mouth of the canyon. The water just rushes over the boulder.
You have to go high up into the mountains to the source, and you carve thousands of tiny new tributary channels over decades. The small nudges are what alter the starting conditions of the chaotic system.
And this raises a fascinating, mind-bending speculation from the text. Theodore realizes that if every time he makes a choice, timelines are branching, he asks Feynman, "Am I splitting too?"
And Feynman says yes.
This instantly brings us back to that Cuban interrogator who knew Theodore's name, or the stranger in Munich who seemed to recognize him.
If Feynman's branching timelines are real, and quantum entanglement allows for subtle communication or resonance across vast distances, maybe those mysterious strangers who recognized Theodore in the past are actually echoes of his other selves.
They are reverberations from different branches where he made different choices.
It is a staggering concept. It implies that time travel is not just movement forward and backward, but movement laterally across infinite, shadowy versions of reality.
He is weaving through the quantum echoes of his own choices.
It's incredible world building. But while the physics of time reveal this fluid, chaotic, and probabilistic universe, Theodore is still just a man grieving his father.
The physics tell him how the universe works, but he still needs to find his personal place within it.
Knowing about probability fields doesn't cure his loneliness.
He needs the epiphany of the observer, which is section 4.
To find that emotional grounding, Theodore turns to the modern cosmologists. He travels to Cambridge in 1995 to speak with Stephen Hawking.
And this scene is brilliantly tense. Theodore walks into the room, and before he can even introduce himself, Hawking's voice synthesizer crackles to life and bluntly states, "You are a time traveler." Honestly, if I was Theodore, I would have turned around and walked right back out. How could Hawking possibly know that just by looking at him?
Hawking deduces it purely through logic and behavioral observation, combined with his knowledge of physics.
He begins discussing the Novikov self-consistency principle with Theodore.
Now, this is a real heavy concept in astrophysics. Novikov posited that if an event exists that would cause a paradox or any change to the past whatsoever, then the probability of that event occurring is exactly zero.
Meaning the universe simply won't allow the grandfather paradox.
Exactly. It means time loops are closed and immutable. If you travel back in time to stop a tragedy, your presence there was already part of the historical record, and your actions will actually cause the very thing you're trying to stop.
Hawking tells Theodore that his attempts to save Caesar and JFK didn't fail because history was fighting him. They failed because his presence was already baked into the equation.
It was always there, failing.
Which perfectly explains why Theodore felt like history had an immune system. He wasn't fighting history, he was fulfilling it.
Every time he tried to rebel, he was just playing his assigned role in the script.
Yes. Hawking suggests that Theodore might be what physics calls a fixed point in time.
An anomaly that exists outside the normal flow of history but is inextricably woven through it.
Hawking hypothesizes that the human brain subconsciously recognizes this temporal inconsistency.
That's why strangers keep spotting him, why the Cuban officer felt he was out of place, and why people feel a sense of eerie, subconscious familiarity around him. He is a walking ripple in reality.
Hold on, what does this actually mean for Theodore emotionally?
Yeah.
If Hawking is right, and Theodore is just a fifth anomaly who physically cannot change the macro events of history, isn't that incredibly depressing? He's effectively a ghost.
A passenger looking out the window of a train he cannot steer, watching people he loves crash.
How does he find any purpose in a life like that?
You would think it would crush him completely, but Theodore actually finds it profoundly liberating.
To understand why, he takes one more trip to the Mount Wilson Observatory in California in 1928 to meet the astronomer Edwin Hubble.
Hubble is the man who discovered that the universe is expanding, proving that the cosmos is vastly, unimaginably larger than just our Milky Way galaxy.
Theodore finds him at the eyepiece of the giant Hooker telescope, looking at the redshift of distant galaxies.
Theodore is exhausted. He confesses to Hubble that he feels utterly insignificant, like the past and the future are set in stone and he is just a useless spectator.
And Hubble tells him that his desire for control is an illusion born of ego.
We are all shaped by forces far larger than ourselves: gravity, time, cosmic expansion.
Hubble famously believed that humanity's true role was one of observation and discovery, not domination.
If the past is written in the stars, visible but unchangeable, then Theodore's role is not to be the arrogant author or the heavy-handed editor of the script.
He is the audience. He realizes, echoing Carl Sagan's famous sentiment, that we are a way for the cosmos to know itself.
He realizes he isn't meant to rewrite the geopolitical events of history. He's meant to simply belong in the moments he visits.
He isn't a ghost. He is the ultimate witness. Hawking told him earlier, you seek to change events. But have you considered that you may be changing people?
That is the crucial, life-altering pivot for Theodore. He finally accepts that he cannot change the macro events, the wars, the assassinations, the treaties.
But he can change the micro landscape.
He can change the internal, emotional landscape of the individual people he interacts with. He can offer comfort, plant ideas, and foster understanding.
He stops trying to save their bodies and starts trying to save their minds.
Which launches us into the most beautiful and moving part of the book. Section 5, History's Messenger.
Once Theodore accepts his role as a witness and a steward of knowledge, he decides to use his gift to visit the people whose ideas did manage to change the world, even if those geniuses never lived to see their own vindication.
He becomes a gardener of knowledge. His first stop is Abdera, Greece, in 400 BCE, to meet Democritus, the laughing philosopher.
Democritus was the first person to theorize that all matter is made of tiny, invisible particles called atoms.
Theodore sits with him and confirms that atoms are real, but he adds the quantum knowledge he learned from Feynman. Atoms are not indivisible, and at the smallest scale, they move with total, chaotic unpredictability.
And Democritus just laughs. He is thrilled to realize that the universe is fundamentally built on chance, not rigid fate.
But Theodore feels a deep pang of guilt because he knows humanity will eventually split the atom and use that energy to build devastating weapons that will vaporize cities.
He hints at this darkness to Democritus.
But the ancient philosopher wisely notes that early men once feared fire, but eventually learned to cook food and forge tools with it, even if they still occasionally burn each other.
He tells Theodore, fire doesn't just burn, it illuminates.
It is a beautiful moment of absolution for Theodore. He is no longer bearing the weight of future sins.
He then travels to Kent, England, in 1865 to meet Charles Darwin, and later to Indonesia in 1858 to meet Alfred Russel Wallace, the independent co-discoverer of natural selection.
Theodore explains to Darwin how his theory will become the absolute foundation of all biology, and how it will intersect with genetics, a concept Darwin was missing and struggling with.
They have this incredible, deeply intellectual discussion where they realize that ideas themselves evolve exactly like biological species.
Theodore introduces the modern concept of memes, not internet jokes, but Richard Dawkins' original definition. Units of culture that adapt, mutate, survive, or die out based on their environment.
Darwin is amazed to realize that his theory of natural selection applies to the very evolution of human knowledge itself.
And when he visits Wallace in the sweltering jungle, we see a crucial counter-perspective. Wallace was observing the deep interconnectedness of ecosystems.
He warned Theodore of the danger of unchecked capitalist greed, destroying the very nature they are trying to study.
Wallace firmly believes science should serve social justice, not just industry. Theodore realizes that dropping knowledge into the timeline isn't enough. Knowledge must be wielded with moral responsibility.
Then he visits Gregor Mendel in 1865 in Austria-Hungary. Mendel is just tending his pea plants in the quiet monastery garden, completely ignored and dismissed by the larger scientific community.
Theodore desperately wants to validate him. He tells Mendel that his obscure work on genetics will one day change the entire world.
But Mendel is completely unbothered by his current obscurity. He views his discoveries like dormant seeds waiting for the right season to bloom.
Mendel embodies the ultimate patience of the true scientist. He tells Theodore, the truths of nature are not ours to keep, only to uncover.
He doesn't need the fame, the awards, or the validation. He just needed to plant the seed in the soil. He trusts the future to water it.
It's so poetic, and it leads directly into what I think is the most heartbreaking scene in the entire book.
Greenland, 1930.
Yes. Theodore goes to find Alfred Wegener, the meteorologist who proposed the theory of continental drift.
During his life, Wegener was mocked, ridiculed, and ostracized by the scientific establishment. They thought his idea that continents moved was a joke.
Theodore finds him in a tiny tent, freezing to death in a massive Arctic storm.
Wegener is literally taking his last breaths. He is dying with the heavy belief that his life's work is a failure, a joke to the world.
And Theodore just sits down beside him in the freezing dark. He tells him gently that he was right.
He explains that the continents sit on massive tectonic plates. He explains seafloor spreading, He assures Wegener that decades from now, he will be completely vindicated and celebrated as a visionary.
Wegener just lets out this weak, wheezing laugh and says, "Not many men get to know their ideas will outlive them."
He dies there in the freezing ice, but because of Theodore, he dies with total peace.
It's like Theodore has become this intellectual bumblebee, flying through the centuries, cross-pollinating ideas, and bringing solace to the isolated, tortured geniuses of history.
That bumblebee analogy is perfect because it ties right back to Darwin. Darwin explicitly connected biological evolution to the evolution of knowledge, and Theodore is the pollinator ensuring the flowers bloom.
By visiting these thinkers, Theodore is actively nurturing the tree of knowledge. He finally understands Confucius.
History doesn't need a sculptor with a chisel, violently hacking away at marble to force a shape. It needs a gardener.
Wegener's tragic but peaceful death proves that ideas outlive their mortal creators. Ideas drift slowly and unstoppably, much like the continents themselves.
Theodore even visits Marie and Pierre Curie in their radium-glowing lab in Paris in 1904.
He grapples heavily with the ethics of his knowledge. Should he tell them about the deadly nature of radiation?
That the very elements they are isolating will literally poison their bodies and will be used to build atomic weapons.
But Marie, looking at the glowing blue light of the radium, tells him, "Nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood."
Theodore chooses to honor their fearless pursuit of truth, rather than burdening them with the horror of the future. He lets them have their pure discovery.
Theodore has fully embraced his role as a messenger and a gardener, but Stroop doesn't let him off the hook that easily.
This brings us to the final critical evolution of his character in Section 6, history's archivist.
Because being a gardener assumes your garden doesn't burn down. Being a messenger assumes the messages aren't destroyed.
What happens when the physical vessels of all this beautiful knowledge are obliterated?
Right. Theodore confronts the terrifying fragility of physical knowledge. He goes to Egypt in 1799 and watches Pierre-François Bouchard, a French soldier, unearth the Rosetta Stone from a muddy trench.
Theodore stands there and realizes that if that soldier's pickaxe had swung just a few inches in the wrong direction and shattered the stone, or if the stone had been dropped into the ocean during transport, thousands of years of ancient Egyptian history, language, and culture would have remained permanently, irreversibly locked away.
It was pure, blind luck that it survived.
That realization of luck terrifies him. He thinks about all the Rosetta Stones that didn't survive, the lost plays, the lost math, the erased cultures.
Which inevitably takes him to the greatest intellectual tragedy of the ancient world, the Library of Alexandria 48 BCE.
Stroop writes this scene like a horror movie for intellectuals. Julius Caesar's siege has accidentally set the city docks on fire, and the flames spread to the library.
Theodore runs into the building. It is absolute choking chaos. Scholars are screaming, ancient scrolls are catching fire, the air is thick with the smell of burning parchment.
Theodore desperately meets Callimachus, the famed librarian. Theodore frantically tries to gather as many scrolls as he can shove into his satchel.
He knows that the cure for diseases, lost philosophical treatises, the true history of erased civilizations are all literally burning right in front of him.
He grabs an armful of priceless scrolls, but in the frantic rush to escape the collapsing roof and the swords of the Roman soldiers in the streets, his satchel is knocked away.
He is trampled. He loses almost everything.
He emerges into the smoky, soot-filled air of Alexandria, coughing, bleeding, clutching only 3 single scrolls out of an estimated 400,000.
3 scrolls out of hundreds of thousands.
I have to ask about this moment. Theodore saves just 3 scrolls, then he goes back to his quiet study in his own time, and he spends hours meticulously translating and copying them by hand.
But he sits there looking at his fresh ink drying on the paper, and he has this dark realization: physical paper burns just as easily as ancient papyrus.
The servers we use today can be wiped out by a solar flare. Does he just throw his hands up in defeat?
What is the point of saving a physical book if time, fire, or rot will eventually claim it anyway?
It is the ultimate existential crisis for an archivist. What is the point of preservation if entropy always wins?
But Theodore reaches his final, most mature realization. To find the answer, he travels centuries later to the exact same city, Alexandria, in 415 CE.
He goes to speak with the brilliant philosopher and mathematician Hypatia.
Alexandria is tearing itself apart with religious and political extremism. Hypatia is bravely teaching mathematics and astronomy on the public steps despite death threats.
Theodore warns her to flee, but Hypatia refuses. And she gives him this chilling warning about humanity.
She says that reason and logic do not always sway the masses.
She says men are often not drawn to the truth for its own sake, but for the comfort it gives them. They will naturally avoid the truth and even destroy it if it gives them no comfort at all.
And that is the absolute crux of the entire novel. Theodore realizes that fire isn't the real enemy of knowledge.
The burning of the library was a physical tragedy, yes, but physical destruction is only a symptom.
The real enemy, as Hypatia points out, is apathy. It is willful ignorance. It is the deep-seated human desire for the lazy comfort of a simple falsehood over the difficult challenge of complex truth.
True preservation isn't about hoarding physical scrolls in a stone fortress. If nobody cares what's written on the scrolls, if nobody can read them, they're as good as ash anyway.
Precisely. A steward's true battle is against the slow erosion of intellectual curiosity. The only way to truly preserve knowledge is to weave it into the living minds of people.
You have to foster a culture that values truth, questions assumptions, and violently refuses to let history be forgotten.
Knowledge must be a living, breathing thing, passed from teacher to student, from parent to child, debated in public squares.
Think about you, the listener, right now. Think about the endless information on the smartphone sitting next to you.
You walk around with the modern equivalent of the Library of Alexandria in your pocket.
You have instantaneous access to the sum total of all human knowledge, but are you actually reading it?
Are we engaging with it deeply? Or are we letting the invisible flames of infinite scrolling, algorithmic echo chambers, and sheer numbing apathy burn our intellect down?
We don't need a Roman siege to destroy our library. We just need to stop caring that it's there.
It is a profound, urgent warning from Stroop's novel. Theodore finally understands his father's last words.
His father didn't want him to change the timeline of wars and borders. He wanted him to be a guardian of the human mind.
The real timeline that matters, the only one worth protecting, is the unbroken chain of human curiosity.
Okay, let's pull all of these massive threads together. We have traced Theodore's entire lifelong arc.
He starts with the arrogant hubris of trying to punch the river of time, wrestling assassins, and trying to outmuscle fate to unwrite a world war.
When he is physically beaten by the inertia of history, he seeks the solace of philosophy, learning from the Buddha that ignorance is the true root of suffering.
Then he seeks the insight of quantum physics, learning from Feynman and Poincaré that the universe is a chaotic, branching casino of probability where you have to carve tiny tributaries to change the flow.
He then finds his emotional place as an observer, taught by Hawking and Hubble that he's not a useless ghost but a vital witness to the cosmos knowing itself.
He takes on the mantle of history's messenger, bringing comfort to brilliant, dying minds like Wegener and Mendel.
And finally, he takes the solemn oath of an archivist, realizing that the ultimate battle is not against the fire that burns the books, but against the apathy that lets the ashes blow away.
It is an incredible, sweeping journey from trying to violently control reality to ultimately dedicating oneself to deeply understanding it.
And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering idea based on a very specific, beautiful detail from the text that we haven't touched on yet.
Throughout the entire story, Theodore's brass, steam-powered timepiece is described as his anchor. It's a beautifully crafted machine.
He uses it to jump from century to century, from ancient Rome to 1960s Dallas.
But remember back in Cuba, when that mysterious, time-aware interrogating officer inspects the timepiece on the metal table under the glaring light.
The officer notes a fascinating detail. He says, in Spanish, that it is a beautiful keepsake. It hisses with steam. It ticks perfectly, but it has no hands on its face.
It has no hands.
It was never a tool to force time forward or backward. It couldn't tell him what time to go to or what time he was currently in.
It was only ever a tool to help him feel and read the rhythm of time.
His father didn't give him a weapon to fight history. He gave him an instrument of understanding.
So what if our own relationship with our personal history isn't about wishing we could go back and change our mistakes?
What if it isn't about wrestling with the ghosts of our past, obsessively trying to force a different outcome in our minds?
What if it is simply having the courage to look at the blank face of the clock, to read those past mistakes clearly, to understand the rhythm of our own failures so we can carry their hard-won lessons into the future?
If we can do that, if we can accept the inertia of our past, we stop exhausting ourselves fighting the river, and we learn how to navigate the current.
You know, at the start of this deep dive, we talked about that historical X-ray machine, how we want history to be a clean, solid white line on a black background.
We want it to be a simple binary diagnosis. But history isn't a static image. It is a living, breathing, incredibly messy conversation across millennia.
And the muddy waters of time aren't meant to be fought or drained or frozen into place. They are meant to be explored.
So don't be afraid to get a little muddy. Keep reading the water, keep questioning the current. And whatever you do, never let the fire of your curiosity burn out.